And I think that if I live to be 97 and live every day with that kind of commitment to those 24 hours, I'll have lived an incredibly full life. And so what it's done is just, I don't think most people when they're 36 years old think a lot about mortality. I've known for almost 5 years that I'm HIV positive. Physically, it's a concern to me in that I try to make choices so as to not bring too much stress into my life. And emotionally, that's where it makes the most difference. When I hear someone on television say AIDS, the deadly disease, which always seems to be combined when they say it on television, I have to tell myself, AIDS is a serious medical condition. It does not mean death. It means that that somebody has to deal very seriously with their health concerns. But dealing seriously with your health concerns means that you're alive. I also think it's important for people in a position like mine to be able to be out, to be able to be open about being HIV positive, so that we can do something to change the face of HIV and the face of AIDS. When I started working last December on creating Too Soon Lost, I thought that what I was going to do was to make a performance piece that dealt with the demolition of Block E. And I did do that, but the piece was about more than that. It was also about the loss of that block and what that's meant for me in those places and those memories. It was also about the loss of friends who've had AIDS and who've died. The choice on the part of the city to call it Block E makes it a faceless place. Nobody identifies with something called Block E. Now, you may have a response to the Best Steakhouse, or Schindler's, or the Great Northern Market, or Moby Dick's, or any of those places where real people go in and sit down and have a drink, and there are real bar stools, or, magazines are sold, or cheap beef and potatoes and whatnot are served to people. All of that is real, but Block E is like a statistic. If people talk about, I don't know what, 100,000 people, I'm not a historian, died in the Civil War, well, that's just a big number. But if you tell me that your grandfather remembers hearing from his mother the story of how his father was killed in the Civil War, that's a very different thing. That I can connect to. And I think that's part of the face of AIDS, too, that needs to be changed, that it needs to be made more personal. Even the statistics can be made more personal. I mean, people, now they've talked about how we've lost more people in this country to AIDS than we lost in the Vietnam War. That starts to make it more personal. And my choice was to tell what I knew. It's just my story. Schindler's on the corner of 7th and Hennepin was built to be a residential hotel until they cut the corner off of it to put a billboard up. I used to live next door, and I'd crawl over the roofs, through the trap door, and down inside. One night we painted our faces like cat burglars and crept over to explore. The 3rd floor was a beautiful vacant space with oak woodwork all the way around and double-paneled sliding oaken doors, and a balcony that opened in the center so that the light could come into the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor had the same beautiful woodwork everywhere, but it wasn't vacant. It was filled with Playboy magazines laid out in rows, month by month, year by year. It was an archives for the store down below. Schindler's was a bookstore, magazine, newsstand. It's the kind of place where you could buy any kind of magazine, including the James White Review. Chasen Gaver had poetry published in the James White Review. I first met Chasen in July of 1983. His name was listed in the Gay Pride Week program, along with other artists who'd performed that week, and so I just called up Chasen cold and told him that I was interested in meeting other gay artists in town, so he very generously invited me to come over that very minute and have tea and get to know each other. Flying to Chasen's memorial service in Washington, I had to change planes in New York City and got caught in a storm. We ended up circling in New York for about 2 hours. By the time the cab got me from DC National to the memorial service, the janitor was just turning out the lights and closing the door. The next building was the Hollywood School of Beauty. It had originally been a greengrocer and a Nickelodeon. It housed a Chinese restaurant and another residential hotel. It had also been my home and my dance studios. I lived there until the inspections department made it impossible to stay. It had been dubbed Block E and slated for redevelopment, so we don't want to have any artists staying there. That might be problematic when it comes time to tear the buildings down. So I decided rather than fight to have a party, and I hired 3 bands, and I got a ticket for making too much noise on 7th and Hennepin on a Saturday night. My favorite view from that building was out the back. I could look out and see rooftops and sides and backs and fronts of buildings, and I still have that view in a painting that hangs in my studio. Next to it hangs a painting by Tom Young. Jason died on Saturday night, and Tom died the next Tuesday morning. I was still too numb from the news of Jason's death to react to Tom's, until I heard that Tom had left me a painting of his in his will. And then I was able to cry for Tom, too. The next building was the smallest one on the block. When I first moved in, it was just a Middle Eastern restaurant. They closed soon afterward, and I was able to buy a stainless steel countertop for my kitchen for $20. They moved out, and Fantasy House moved in. Fantasy House sold lace and latex novelties and had a large section of 25-cent movies in the back. When we filmed Shinders to Shinders, we used that space to film the dancers moving from one booth into the other. The next building was Moby's. Moby's was the kind of bar that everybody who'd never been there was afraid of. But it was the bar where I negotiated and signed my lease with my landlord. See, it's the kind of place that in Minneapolis has a history of being closed down because a lot of black people went there. Before it was Moby's, it was the Flame. Before it was the Flame, it was the President, and I'm sure it was something else before that. Hector would have been comfortable having a drink at Moby's. I first performed with Hector at the Joyce Theater in New York City. He was a wonderful, talented, fiery dancer and a gifted choreographer who was having lots of opportunities to perform and commissions to create dances for the Dance Theater of Harlem and Alvin Ailey. And just as all that was happening, he was starting to get sick. Things progressed pretty fast. And next door to that was the Great Northern Market. Well, not when I lived there. It was owned by the Alexander brothers. But before that, it was the Great Northern. The kind of place where in season you could buy fresh strawberries. Lorenzo told me that the last thing that Tony wanted to sense before he died was the taste of a strawberry. The last building on the block housed McDonald's, Brady's Pub, a head shop, a bowling alley in the basement. Upstairs there was rifle sport, and of course, there was Schindler's on the corner of 6th and Hennepin. Somehow it seems like all of these things are just lost too soon.